Hello everyone, this is Genius Yoshi, and today we're rating some Lorcana cards. Before we begin, let's go quickly over the rating scale. 5-star rating is an amazing card, a card I actually want to play, and I'm quite eager to get my hands on. Just drop on the board and it's going to have a huge impact, and I'm centering my strategy around such powerful cards. 4-star rating is about cards that are solid to play. I want to fill my deck with 4 and 5-star cards. There's no shame in playing a 4-star card, it's just a good card to play. 3 stars is a card that I will play if I really have to. I'm not overly happy about those, but they fill a specific role in my strategy, a specific hole in my curve. I just need to play these things because there are no better options out there. 2 stars are bad cards most of the time, and they're kind of the filler vanilla creatures, cards that there are just better options out there and can be easily replaced by a stronger card. And then there's the 1-star rating that I reserve for bad cards that I don't want in my deck. I explicitly will take them out and replace them with a 2-star card if I have to. I just don't like 1-star cards. And with that, let's start reviewing some cards. Let's get things started with Aladdin, Cornered Swordsman. Now, this is a 2-1 for 2, which is fairly weak stats line, and that 1 willpower does worry me, because there's a handful of cards like Tinkerbell and Hans, which I expect are going to see a bunch of play that can just ping Aladdin dead right off the board for free. Also, he's weak to fire the cannons and pretty much any removal you can think of. Then again, he's a 2-drop, and his job is to try and get some lore before your opponent puts out these stronger cards. You can put a bodyguard in front of Aladdin to try and protect him in combat. Also, you can shift the big 7-drop Aladdin on top of him. And so this does give some use cases to Aladdin, and I can see him making the cut in certain decks. But overall, due to his 1 willpower, he is going to be very susceptible to being removed off of the board. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. Next on our list, we have Beast Hardheaded as a 4/4 for 5 that quests for 2. Now, 5 drops inkable cards, or 4 to 6, is kind of a sweet spot because you get to ink them early and play them in the middle to late game, and they make some pretty good top decks when you draw them. So a 4/4 quest for 2 fits that line for me, which already puts it in the I'm interested pile. Now, when you play it, you can banish an item, which is a situational effect, but when you can get to use it, you basically get to banish an item and you keep your beast, making it a 2-for-1. So it's a great answer for items that are problematic. It's just good value if your opponent's playing items, and if your opponent's not playing items, it's kind of the type of card that you want to include in your inkable spot anyways. It's not overly powerful, but it is very versatile, and one of the very nice cards that I like to play in the inkable slots. So I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. Next on our list, we have Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger, a 3/4 for 4 that cannot be inked, and he quests for 1. When you play this character, you may return Fire the Cannon from your discard pile to your hand, and Fire the Cannon is pretty good, deals 2 damage to anything. Now, early on when we didn't get the full spoilers, this card was fantastic because that 2 points of damage to one character was one of the best answers. But now now that the full set is revealed, there are a lot of other good answers, and dealing 2 points of damage with Fire the Cannon isn't as good anymore. And we also have other good options in terms of 4-drop. And so I think that the Captain Hook, Captain of Jolly Roger, has lost a bit of value here. I still think it's a very nice card that's going to get included with Fire the Cannon, solid baseline. The 1 lore is a bit disappointing, but it's still a powerful card. But I'm going to downgrade it to a 4-star rating with the full set revealed. Then look at Captain Hook, Forceful Duelist. He's a 1/2 for 1, and he's a challenger, so he becomes a 3/2 when challenging opponents' characters. This is a fun effect, and really the main advantage of Captain Hook is that he's really cheap. Just a 1-drop, easy to slam on the board. Now it does cost you 1 card to do that, but with the full spoilers revealed, drawing cards isn't that hard. There's a lot of good ways to draw cards, and because of that, Captain Hook is a very good turn 1 play. Also, even later on in the game, just having a Captain Hook to deal 3 points of damage, you can think of it as a smash on the stick, except that you're paying 1 instead of paying 3. So because of that, I think that our Forceful Duelist is going to be included in quite a bit of decks, and I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. Next up, we have the other Captain Hook, Thinking Happy Thought. He's a 2/5 for 5 non-inkable. You can shift him on top of a smaller Captain Hook, and then he challenges 3, so he becomes a 5/5 on the offensive, only quest for 1, with the ability that characters of cost 3 or less can challenge his character. I'm not overly worried about characters cost 3 or less challenging it, because he has 2 power, and most of these characters have 2 to 4 willpower, not that much power, combat power in general. So I'm more worried about 5 drops and higher just squishing the Captain Hook while he's been exerted. Now in general, I'd say, well, we have Jafar, that's 4 inkable and does the same thing essentially, and that's kind of what I think of Captain Hook. The only saving grace is that this Captain Hook has a shift 3, which you really want to shift on the 1-drop. Shifting it on the 4-drop, not gaining very much. Actually, you're getting a weaker stats line. So you want to shift this on the 1-drop, and then you get a surprise big beater, which can be pretty good. But as a non-inkable card where you need to have the 1-drop in play in order to get the value, I think we're starting to get into very situational territory here. And I'd hate to be stuck with a bunch of Captain Hooks thinking about happy thoughts instead of thinking about the game at hand and winning. And so I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating. Let's take a look at the Guardian of the Underworld, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. He's a 5/6 for 5, quest for 1. Always vigilance, always fierce, always fighting over the ball. Love that flavor text. But in terms of the card, what does it do? Well, it's in that nice spot of inkable and inkable 4 to 6. So I like this card to begin with. But then there's no real effect on the card, and cards without text typically go into the no-no pile. But he does have quite high stats. 5/6 is solid, and he can trade with most 5-drops easily, and 5 and below. He also quests for 1, so you can keep him as a threat to just quest and force the opponent to answer it. So I can see it having some play because we only have 1 set's worth of card. His value is probably going to decrease once we get the 2nd chapter, but for now I can see it included in some deck as a card that's going to be inked most of the time, but played as a good top deck, played in a pinch. I'm going to give this card a 3-star rating. Let's take a look at Donald Duck, Musketeer, a 2/5 for 4 with Bodyguard, 1 questing power, and during your turn your Musketeers gain Evasive, which means that they can challenge Evasive, so it's the bad half of Evasive. Then again, you don't really want your Bodyguards to be evasive because they're supposed to be blocking. But with that said, 2/5 for 4 is okay. It's going to block most 4-drops attempt to challenge your characters, so you can protect your weaker characters. Now, Musketeers, we have about 3 in the set with the Musketeer Tabard supporting the Bodyguards. I don't think it's an overly strong archetype, and that Donald Duck is part of the reason why. It's meh, it's really just stats. Maybe you can fit it in a curve to try and protect your weaker characters, but I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. So I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating. We then review our first legendary creature, Gantu, the Galactic Federation Captain, a 6/6 for 8, quest for 2. Then characters with cost 2 or less can't challenge your characters. Okay, but if you're playing an 8-drop, the time for 1 and 2 drops is over. It's been over for a while now. So Gantu is really just a 6/6 quest 2 for 8. We've just reviewed Cerberus, who's a 5/6 quest 1 for 5. Gantu's pretty bad in terms of stats line, and his effect's not great, and 8 is very hard to reach in a game of Lorcana, especially if you're just piling your curve up to 7, 8, or maybe even 9 drops if you really want to push your luck, maybe in a ramp deck. But all that to say, Gantu has a poor stat line, a poor effect, and there's much better options out there. I'm not sure why this is legendary. I'm going to give it a 1-star rating. Next up, we have Goon's Maleficent's Underling as a 2/2 for 1, quest for 1, and like most pure stats vanilla creatures that are super cheap, they're garbage. As most goons, they will get dispatched almost immediately, serve no value, and let's just play the big bosses instead. Giving this card a 1-star rating. Next, we look at the super rare Hallin's 13th in line, a 3/3 for 4, quest for 2, and whenever he quests, you may deal 1 point of damage to any character you like. Now that's a card. He's inkable in the 4 to 6 range, which is what we want. Decent stats line. 3/3 for 4 is okay. I'd prefer 4/4, but I mean he has a great effect, so let's not be too greedy here. Questing for 2, also great for trying to close the game. The ability to ping anything for 1 is fantastic. Why? Because if your opponent has done a great combat, then hopefully he's defeated one of your character and lived with 1 toughness or willpower. Now hands can just go to quest, take it out. So he applies pressure to your opponent's board. Trades that your opponent would make that would look good suddenly aren't that good because Hans is there. Multiple Hans, ping a 2-drop, or something that has 2 willpower. It's just really good. And the best part is it's not exert ping for 1. It's whenever this character quests, which means that you're also applying pressure to your opponent's lore total. And because it fits all these categories so well, I'm going to give this card a 5-star rating as a almost must include in any steel deck. We then look at Hercules, the true hero, a 3/3 for 3 with bodyguard, quest for 1. Now this is the type of character that you want to play on turn 3 and only on turn 3 in order to protect your weaker characters that are trying to quest for 2. And Hercules is one of the only bodyguards with such a low cost, and because of that he's going to see some play and be decent at it. Just decent. It's not a fantastic card. He doesn't bring a lot to the board. He just brings something to a strategy, and he needs to be played on turn 3, otherwise he gets inked, but that's okay. I mean, if you top deck a 3/3, it's not the worst thing in the world. There are better things to top deck. But typically you're playing a very aggressive deck if you're playing Hercules and you're trying to just stave them off with your true hero. So I'm going to give Hercules True Hero a 3-star rating. Next we have Kristoff, the official Ice Maker, as a 3/3 for 3 that quests for 2. The only thing particular about this card is its ability to quest for 2. But it's a vanilla character with no real ability to speak of, so I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating. You might have to include it in your deck, but you'll feel bad about it. Next off, we have Kronk, the right-hand man, and he's a 6/6 for 6 that quests for 2. So 1 more power, 1 more lore than the Cerberus, and he also costs 1 more. I don't like it as much as a 6-drop as the Cerberus on 5, because 5 is easier to achieve. 6 is starting to get higher up. It is inkable, but I don't think you gain that much more over what Cerberus does, so I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating, favoring Cerberus and other more powerful 6-drop options. We then reach Lilo, the galactic hero with a blaster and a spacesuit, but really this is just a Kristoff with 1 more power, 1 less willpower, slightly weaker version, kind of does the same thing. I guess it trades a bit better, weaker removal, but same star rating, 2 stars for Lilo, and yeah, you don't really want to play that. Next up, we have Maui Demigod. We're having a brilliant display of strength in the artwork. It's an 8/8 for 8 with 3 lore, so just stats and stats, that's what you get. But you have to pay the hefty cost of 8, which is quite hard to reach. And for 8, you really want to have a good effect. So this card is going to go in your ink pool almost 100% of the time, and it's not going to be that good at top deck, because odds are you won't have reached the 8 pieces of ink at that point in your inkwell. So overall, I prefer the Kronk, and I much prefer Cerberus to it. So I'm going to give Maui 1 star. We then see Mickey Mouse Musketeer, a 2/7 for 6 with Bodyguard. Quests for 2, and it has the ability that all your other Musketeer characters gets +1 power. So Mickey Mouse stacks well with other Mickey Mouse's Musketeers, in which their stats are going to grow. Now 6 is a hefty cost, but it's at the top end of the curve. It's also inkable, plays well with other Musketeers, and being able to drop something with 7 willpower that allows you to protect your weaker characters can allow you to do some of these end of game winning quests with your weaker characters and leaving Mickey as a defense. So I think this is definitely somewhat barely playable / okay. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. I can see some uses for it. Definitely don't want to include it in too many decks, but that's fine. Prince Eric, Dashing and Brave, a 1/3 for 2 Challenger and Quest for 1. I used to be fairly high on this card, saying, oh, well, it's essentially like a Smash. But that's what Captain Hook for 1 does. Prince Eric is kind of in this awkward spot where he can't really quest effectively because he's a sitting duck afterwards. And challenging with a 3/3's not that great. So overall, he feels almost like a vanilla character as a vanilla 2-drop, and I'm going to give it a 2-star rating. We then come to Simba, Future King, a 1/2 for 1 Quest for 1 with the ability when you play it, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. I'm not a big fan of this card because it feels like a -1 where you lose a card. Well, the card you lose is the Simba that you place as a 1/2 on the battlefield. Now, in Lorcana, it's not that difficult to replace cards, especially in Steel, thanks to a card that we'll be showing a little later. And because of that, Simba suddenly doesn't seem as bad as I originally thought. I mean, it does allow you to discard one of these expensive, uninkable cards that you would be stuck with early game. It will allow you to throw away a Fire the Cannon to pick it up later with a Captain Hook. It does allow you to sift through your deck a little bit faster and apply some level of pressure on the board. So it's not terrible. It has some uses, and because you can refill your hand with some more expensive cards, I think Simba Future King might see play in certain decks, in particular combo decks, for examples. And so I'm going to give this card a 3-star rating. Next up, we have Big Simba, the Return King, a 4/6 for 7 with Challenger 4. So he acts like an 8/6 on the offense, 4/6 on defense, and during this turn, this character gains evasive. So you can challenge characters with evasive, which is a very minor upside, but it's an upside. Quest for 2, which is fine. My biggest problem with this card is that it's a 7-drop. And I really like the 4 to 6 range being the top end of your curve, especially for inkable cards. You'll want to have a lot in that range. 7's pushing the boundary a bit. And what does Simba Return King bring up over some of these other 6-drops? And the answer is nothing, really. So I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating. The ability to challenge through evasive stats, I don't feel too good about the Return King. We then have a third Simba in a row, the rightful heir. Do we hit it right this time? So he's a 3/5, costing 5 that cannot be inked. And he knows what I have to do. During our turn, whenever this character banishes another character in challenge, we gain 1 lore, and he quests for 2. I have 2 problems with this card. The first one is that to gain the lore from the challenge, which can be a good ability, you need Simba Rightful Heir to hit hard. And 3 power is just not that great. You can have 3 drops that have 3 power. So stats lines are a bit disappointing for that kind of ability. And then he's not inkable. If he was inkable, I'd like him. He'd fit that 4/6 inkable, nice top deck late game. But now he just has weak stats. He's going to be stuck in your hand. You'll really have to play him on turn 5. And you're playing a beater with a weak stat line on turn 5, which isn't what I want to do. So I'm actually going to give this card... I'm not sure. I don't want to be too harsh. I'm going to give it a 2-star rating. I think he might still see some play. Maybe if you're playing mono steel and you really don't have any other option. Maybe if you can boost him with some of that, the ability that allows you to boost another character's power. Maybe that there's some play with Simba there, but I think it's niche at best. Next we have Starkey Henchman, a 5/4 for 5, quest for 1, and while you have captain character in play, gets +1 lore. So if you just have him on the board, he's really just a Cerberus with 2 less willpower, and needing captain on board is not a big requirement, but I'm still going to rate him like a Cerberus with 2 fewer willpower and give him a 2-star rating. And send him back to washing the decks, I guess. Now let's look at our next legendary. A 5/5 for 6, Theka, the Heartless. Now, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore. And it quests for 2. So it's really similar to the Simba that we just discussed, except that it packs a slightly better stats line with 5/5, so it's easier to take these challenge wins, and you gain 2 lore for the challenges, which is much stronger. Still within that 4/6 bound, and it's inkable, which is the kind of card we want to play. I'm not super excited about this card. It's solid. It's the type of card I want to play in my deck. It's the type of card I'm going to be inking a lot of the time. It's kind of sad to be inking legendaries, but you gotta do what the right play is. So I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. It's solid. You want to play it. You're going to play it if you have them, and ink them away until you top deck them late in the game, and then you're really happy that you're playing such powerful legendaries. Next, keeping up with the 6 drops that are inkable, we have Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, a 4/5 for 6, quest for 2. It's okay stats line, it's in that 4/6 inkable, which I really like, so Tinkerbell will be at very least good to ink. Let's see if she packs good abilities. Shift 4, so you can play her on top of a smaller Tinkerbell, always a fine upside. Rock the Boat. When you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. Okay, that's very strong. You get to ping everything your opponent has. It's a 6-drop, so not that expensive, and 4/5 stats line. Already, this is an amazing card. There must be a downside. Puny Pirate. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to chosen opposing character. It gets better. This card is the definition of a 5-star rating, if not a 6-star rating. This card, it competes for the strongest card in the entire first chapter. It has very good stat line. 4/5 quest for 2 for 6. Amazing enter the battlefield ability. Has an impact when you play her. Just boom. You can shift her to play her earlier. She didn't need that. Actually, if you completely ignore the shift, she's still 5-star. No questions asked. And then it gets better. If your opponent leaves something open and you get to challenge and take it out, you can deal 2 damage to anything you like. It's a fantastic card. And if you can afford it, you will be playing 4 copies of Tinkerbell in every single deck that plays Steel for the rest of the first chapter, and probably a lot more chapters. Let's take a look at the other Tinkerbell. Tiny Tactician, a 2/4 for 3 inkable, quest for 1 with the ability to exert her, draw a card, choose and discard a card. Tiny bit of card selection, puny stats. After reviewing Big Sister Tinkerbell, this feels very lackluster, I must say. I'm going to give her 2 stars. I think she's about a vanilla character, yet slightly weaker stats with the card selection ability, but not even on the enter the battlefield. Feels weak to me. We then reach A Whole New World, a 5-drop action song, which says each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards, and you can sing it for 5, which is extremely powerful. So card draw was very rare in the earlier spoilers that we've gotten, and A Whole New World brings the card game to a whole new level, a whole new world in itself. This is an extremely powerful effect, and I cannot emphasize that enough. In the other trading card games, these cards have either been banned or they've changed the rules of the game to make it so that the card is limited. In Magic, there's Time Twister. It's part of the Power 9s that has that ability for yourself, and that's been banned forever. In Yu-Gi-Oh! There was Fiber Jar, Cyber Jar that got banned for refreshing your hands with a whole new set of cards. In Pokemon trading card game, you have Professor Oak or all the professors that are kind of stapled, but because of their ability is so strong, they had to implement this rule of you can only play one of these types of cards or similar cards per turn. These types of cards in A Whole New World is going to have the same impact on Lorcana. It's format breaking. It's just that important. And you can play it for free by singing it. And there's a couple of singer cards that can sing it fairly early, even earlier than turn 5. You can't ink it. You shouldn't be. It's just already very, very strong. Deserves a 5-star rating at least. And it is going to be a card that you need to expect your opponent to play. Because as a player, if I play A Whole New World, I get to send cards to the discard pile, which might help my strategy, but I get to refresh my hand with a bunch of new cards, which means I can be super aggressive putting cards in the ink pool. Cards that allow me to put multiple cards in the ink pool a turn, or playing these cheaper drops like Simba that allows me to do some card selection that would normally put me down a card. Well, A Whole New World allows you to reset all of that. And not only that, but if your opponent is banking on their 6, 7, 8 drops in hand, they're itchy to play them, Whole New World, bam! Wash those away. Get 7 new cards. You're messing up your opponent's strategy. Yes, you're giving them a bunch of new resources, and it's generally going to be beneficial to your opponent. But just when you get in that state of mind of planning your turns and suddenly your opponent kind of shuffles everything up, your game plan kind of gets thrown out the window and you need to rethink it. And forcing that change of mind in the opponent is already worth something in itself. And again, the main effect is not that. The main effect is you're just refreshing your hand. And you know you're going to be playing this, so you can just ink a card, activate an effect to ink another card, play as much as you want, sing A Whole New World, boom, you're set up for the next turn. And you've maximized the efficiency of your hand. And the effect might be symmetrical, but the opponent didn't get that opportunity to just play out everything. They're planning out their next few turns, and they're completely messed up by this card. Very, very powerful. I cannot emphasize that enough. Next up, we have Break. Banish chosen item, costs 2, inkable. It's one of those cards that's you're planning on inking it 90% of the time, and then if you have a good use case, bam! Break the chosen item. Problem is, when you're late game, you don't really want to ink cards anymore, and you're top decking a break. Well, that's what it does to your strategy. It breaks you because it's a dead card. And we all hate dead cards. Play Beast instead. Ooh, actually, scratch that. 1 star. Play Beast instead. Next up, we have Fire the Cannon. Deal 2 damage to chosen character, and it only costs 1. Super cheap, super effective removal spell that unfortunately doesn't banish that many characters, but still very useful. And since damage sticks with combat, if you can kind of put it with either another Fire the Cannon to take down a bigger threat, take out an early threat, combine it with some damage, it's just a solid card. The fact that you can't ink it is a bit of a downside, but the fact that you can get it back with a Captain Hook makes it pretty good. I think it's just going to be a staple in a lot of decks, and I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. It's not amazing, it's just very good. So you thought Fire the Cannon was pretty good. Well, what happens if you fire the cannon at all of your opponent's characters? That's what Grab Your Sword does. So 5 ink, boom boom boom, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. This can be a one-sided board wipe. Extremely powerful. Now, this is probably going to be somewhat format defining, especially with Fire the Cannon, in that decks are going to be built to avoid having 2 toughness characters, because you do not want to be completely blown out. And because of this, it actually lowers a little bit the value of Grab Your Sword. Also, there aren't that many characters that have 2 toughness or less. But if you can play a pair of Grab Your Swords, which is easily doable by singing it and then casting another one, as long as you have the 2 in hand, which can be quite challenging, definitely not a guarantee, then you can deal significant damage to your opponent's board. And just in general, if you can hit 2 or 3 characters with Grab Your Sword, you've done the damage you need. And so this is a solid card. The fact that you can sing it is amazing. And the fact that it's not inkable is a bit of a problem, but it's not that bad. It's just such a strong card that you're going to want to play it at the perfect time and just go boom. And that'll be all. So I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. It's very, very good, on the edge of the 5-star, but I feel like some of these 5-star cards just push the limit one step further. Ransack. A 2-drop action. Draw 2 cards and choose and discard 2 cards. This is weak because you're losing a card by doing it. Now, it does give you a lot of card selection. So if you're playing a combo deck, you might want to play Ransack just to dig up those combo pieces. But at this point in time, there isn't a combo strong enough in Lorcana to warrant playing some Ransacks. So I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating, just because it's going to have some uses at some point in some combo deck that has yet to exist. Otherwise, it's trash. Now it's time for Hulk's favorite card, Smash. A 3-drop that deals 3 damage to 1 character. Very simple, very effective. A lot of 3-drops have 3 willpower, so it's an efficient removal spell. It's actually one of the most efficient middle line removal spell. If you don't want it, you ink it, no problem. So I think this is going to be, like a staple card, a 4-star rating. Very good, very efficient, nothing overly fancy, but you want to play it. And that's 4 stars for you. Next up, we have Beast's Mirror, a 2-drop item with the ability of pay 3, and if you have no cards in hand, draw a card. This is fairly weak, according to me. I mean, the problem's not so much about wasting turn 2, dropping this on board. The problem is not that you're investing a card by playing Beast's Mirror on the field. The problem is really that when you're paying 3 to draw a card, odds are you don't have the ink necessary to play that card anymore. So I'd rather just have my 4 to 6 inkable cards in a lot of my deck and being able to top deck those and play those when I run out of cards. Or even better, play a whole new world, which solves all my card drawing needs in a very efficient, very powerful way, and Beast Mirror does not. So I'm going to give Beast Mirror a 1-star and put it back to the closet where it belongs. Next up, we have Frying Pan, a 2-drop item with clang, banish this item, chosen character can't challenge during their next turn. This is absolutely awful. I'm going to give it 1 star because I can't give a lower rating. But you are wasting a card to make sure that a character can't challenge your next turn, which means they can still quest, they can still sing, they just cannot challenge. It's a very big investment for that. I've already spent too much time talking about a 0 to 1 star rated card, so let's move on to the next one. The next card is Musketeer Tabard, a 4-drop non-inkable item with all for one and one for all. Whenever one of your character with bodyguard is banished, you may draw a card. Now, if you think about it, we only have about 3 Musketeers, I think, in the set, and they're all fairly expensive. So gaining the draw 1 card when they die is not that great. But if you read the card a bit more carefully, this card has nothing to do with Musketeers. It just says bodyguard, which suddenly increases the card pool of cards that can make use of this effect significantly. The problem with this card is that it's a 4-drop and you have to invest all that ink without applying any pressure on the board. So it's not really a card you want to play on turn 4. You kind of want to develop your board quite a bit, and then you play the Musketeer Tabard to make sure you don't run out of cards. And the tempo in which, what is the correct timing to play that Musketeer Tabard? Is it going to be stuck in your hand until you reach that point? Are you going to be stuck with multiples? How many do you play? I think this is a card where if you're playing like 10 or so bodyguards, maybe a somewhat bodyguard heavy strategy, you want to play a handful of Musketeers Tabard. Maybe 2's the magic number, so you don't get stuck with too many. It's a fine card, but it's a card you have to be very careful around, because while it might be a win more card, it's not a card that's going to help you come back from behind. It's not a card that's going to help your current board presence, but it does help in kind of a stalemate situation where you can start exchanging resources and come out on top. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. Last but not least, we have the Plasma Bastard. If you like to pew pew and play a 3-drop with Quick Shot, just pay 2 ink to deal 1 damage to a chosen character. Now, dealing damage to a chosen character on demand is pretty good. The problem is that if you're spending 2 ink on using the Plasma Blaster, you can't spend all your ink to play that next powerful card that's going to impact the board. I'd rather have a Hans in play that has stats, still a 3-drop, and can ping by questing, which is much better. I'd rather be playing my Tinkerbell to just ping everything and have a powerful body on the battlefield. I do not have the time to play a little Plasma Blaster and start pew-pewing creatures or characters just one at a time. Spending all my ink pew-pewing while you're putting threats on the board. I've dealt with one of your threats, but you've placed 4 and won the game. Unfortunately, I don't see a place for Plasma Blaster, so I'm going to give it a 1-star rating. There are just better options out there. While it's a fun card, conceptually, it just doesn't have a good place. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and my card review of all the steel cards from Lorcana TheFirstChapter. Let me know in the comments below where you agree, where you disagree with my reviews. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on the reviews of the other ink types, deck lists that are coming soon, and all other fun Lorcana stuff. On that note, enjoy the release of Lorcana, and have a great day.